Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Isaiah chapter 35 in our continuing study of the Old Testament prophets. So far in Isaiah, beginning in chapter 1, you had those woes of judgment that were against Judah, and then you came to chapters 6 through 12. There was a sun theme and also a song of salvation in those chapters. And then we came to the central core of this early section of Isaiah from beginning in chapter 13. We had a number of woes to the nations, to Babylon, to Assyria, to Philistia, Moab, Damascus, Cush, and then Egypt and Cush, so I lumped them together, Babylon, Edom, Arabia, Jerusalem, Tyre, and finally, sort of everybody, the earth, the land. And then we had another song of salvation. So notice we had that earlier, and now we have it now. And we're coming to the last section of this whole area. We've been seeing woes of judgment against Judah, but we come to chapter 35, and the woes are just about at an end. Our chapter begins, the wilderness and the desert will be glad. And when you speak about the wilderness and the desert, you have to put yourself in that location. Now, I've had a little bit of experience with physical deserts, although it has been limited. I've gone through some deserts, but I haven't really experienced them. I've gone through deserts in air conditioning and riding in vehicles, and I had sunglasses and ice water, and that's not really experiencing a desert at all. I remember my first time going into the Sinai, where we had been in Egypt for a couple of weeks, and we drove out, and after about 2 hours in the Sinai desert, I was ready to go back. And imagine the experience of the ancient traveler. He gets out on that trackless desert, and the sun is hot, and he has only the water he can carry with him. And though it's a heavy burden, he has to carry it or else he's going to die. And he doesn't know when he's going to see water again. And if he does see it, is it going to be a mirage? Is it going to be a trick of his eyes? And it's against that kind of backdrop that we begin to read the wilderness and the desert will be glad. And the Araba, that's just another name for that desert area. Sometimes it's used of the area on the around the Jordan River, not right at the Jordan, but on either side. It tends to get rather dry there. And that Araba will rejoice and blossom like the crocus. It will blossom profusely and rejoice with rejoicing and shout of joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it. And you have to imagine when you talk about the glory of Lebanon, Lebanon is this rich foliage. You're seeing a picture of it here on the side, the forests of Lebanon, and the majesty of Carmel and Sharon. And these are lush, fertile valleys. Lebanon is full of trees. Carmel and Sharon overlook the farmlands. But wherever you're looking, it's green. And they will see the glory of the Lord, the majesty of our God. Verse 3, encourage the exhausted and strengthen the feeble. Say to those with anxious heart, take courage, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. Notice we've been in that entire judgment theme all throughout, all the way from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 35 with the occasional break. But now it's spoken in hope. Your God will come with vengeance. The recompense of God will come, but he will save you. And notice, this it's been looking at the theme of the desert and dryness. And that's not just the physical desert, that's the spiritual desert, the spiritual traveler who's been going through difficult times. He's in a spiritual desert and he thirsts for that which he doesn't have, a cool, refreshing draught of not just physical water, but spiritual water. And he's looking for that which God can provide. Verse 5, then the eyes of the blind will be open. And we've seen the theme earlier in Isaiah, the blind being able to see, the ears being able to hear, the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. Then the lame man will leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute will shout for joy. For waters will break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the Araba. Now, this is a prophecy that's fulfilled in Jesus. He's the one who came and opened the eyes of the blind, who unstopped the ears of the deaf, who caused the lame to run the hurdles, and brought praise from the lips of the one who previously could not speak. And if the gospel accounts tell us anything at all about Jesus, they tell us that he was known far and wide as a healer. You see, the curse that's on the earth that's being pictured by this desert, this dryness, that curse was overturned in Christ. Because man was not created to be blind or deaf or lame or dumb. These things entered the world as a result of a creation curse. It's not that those individuals did something wrong, but the entire creation suffers under this curse and has been tainted. And we live in a fallen cosmos. And in a fallen cosmos, bad things take place. But Christ came to do away with the curse. He came to take that curse upon himself. His death upon the cross was a payment for sin's demand, and he paid that with his own body. And as a result, because of his death and burial, but especially because of his resurrection, that brings about the promise of a new life to all creation. And so there's coming a day when we will see the effects of the curse that are overcome. And so we come to verse 7, the scorched land will become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. In the haunt of jackals, its resting place, grass becomes reed and rushes. Verse 8, a highway will be there. Now I have to put just a slight Hebrew notation there. The term highway here, masul, is this idea there. And highway works. That's a good translation. But don't think, cement, concrete highways are like interstates like we have. They didn't have those back then. But still, a raised up road, that works nicely. A road that lets you travel from point A to point B. A highway will be there, and then we've got a different word, a more common word, a roadway. The Hebrew word here is derek, and what's sort of interesting, the way here, and I probably would have just translated it the way. A highway will be there, a way, and it will be called the way, and it's the same word there. For some reason, they translated a highway here too, but it's still the same word, derek. Derek HaKadosh, the highway of holiness. And so here's the idea, because you don't normally have a raised up road. You don't normally have all sorts of ways in the desert. After all, a highway is a place where lots of people travel, and a roadway, there's people traveling. And people usually did not travel, if they could help it, through the desert, because the desert's not a very friendly place to travel. There's no water there. And it's in the desert that we thirst. And spiritually, it's in the desert where we thirst for the one who can quench our spiritual thirst. But notice he says it will be called the highway of holiness, and the reason it's called the highway of holiness is because the unclean will not travel on it. But it will be for him who walks that way, and fools will not wander on. It's a highway for the spiritually astute. Verse 9, no lion will be there, nor will any vicious beast be upon it. You would find those things out in the literal desert. These will not be found there, but the redeemed will walk there, and the ransomed of the Lord will return. Notice redeemed and ransomed, those are just two different ways of saying the same thing, two different words, but they mean essentially the same thing. Those that have been delivered, those that have been purchased by God and brought back to himself, and the ransomed of the Lord will return and come with joyful shouting to Zion. Zion is the picture of God's presence. That's where the temple was. And they'll come with joyful shouting to Zion with everlasting joy upon their heads. They will find gladness and joy, and by contrast, sorrow and sighing will flee away. Have you come to that highway in the desert? Have you been ransomed? Have you been redeemed? The idea of a ransom presupposes a former captivity. And the idea of redemption presupposes a former slavery. And when you recognize that you've been captive, that you've been enslaved to sin, then you have a promise, and it's a promise for all who come to Christ in faith. It is a promise that your captivity is at an end. It's that you've been released from your slavery, and the result of your ransom and your redemption is that you can come with joyful shouting to Zion, into the presence of God, and there find joy.